The small town of Pine Ridge buzzed with usual morning activity as Lyra walked down Main Street. Her camouflage technology made her appear as a tall woman with pale skin and blonde hair, though Ethan could still see her true emerald skin and pointed ears. The alien commander had been on Earth for 3 weeks now and was growing more comfortable with human interaction. Ember stayed hidden in a special pouch Lyra wore, though occasionally the dragon would peek out, curious eyes taking in everything. The creature had grown noticeably larger now, the size of a small dog rather than a cat. Its scales shifted to a deep blue when content, which seemed to be its default state around humans, much to Lyra's continued puzzlement. They entered the local diner where Betty, the owner, greeted them warmly. "You two becoming regulars," she said with a smile as she led them to a booth by the window. "Usual orders?" Ethan nodded while Lyra observed the interaction with fascination. She had developed a fondness for pancakes, something not found on her homeworld. The sweet food, combined with what humans called maple syrup, was a sensory experience. The Sylvan commander found herself craving after Betty left. Lyra leaned forward. "Your human food establishments operate with remarkable efficiency," she commented. "The distribution of nutrients is organized yet maintains what you call personal touch. This combination of function and connection was not in our data." Ethan smiled at her formal way of describing a friendly diner. He had grown used to her analytical perspective, but also noticed it softening over time. Her reports back to her people, which she made when she thought he wasn't listening, had become less frequent and less detailed, a fact that both relieved and concerned him. As they ate, Lyra suddenly stiffened her attention, fixed on something outside the window. Ethan followed her gaze. A black SUV had parked across the street, a woman in a dark suit stepping out. She had short red hair and moved with purpose, scanning the street before walking toward the diner. The woman in black entered the diner, her eyes sweeping the room before landing on their table. She walked directly toward them. Lyra tensed her hand, moving subtly toward a hidden pocket where Ethan knew she kept a small device of unknown purpose. "Mind if I join you?" the woman asked. Without waiting for an answer, she slid into the booth beside Ethan. "My name is Kate Winters," she said, placing a government ID on the table, briefly before tucking it away. "And you must be the alien who crashed in Rockies National Park 3 weeks ago." Ethan felt his heart skip, while Lyra maintained perfect composure. "How interesting," she replied, her voice steady. "You appear to be suffering from delusions, human Kate." Kate smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Cut the act. We detected your crash. We know what you are. The only reason you're still free is because we wanted to see what you'd do." She leaned forward, and frankly, we're surprised. "You seem to be enjoying pancakes and small-town life rather than gathering military intelligence." Lyra glanced at Ethan, who felt a cold pit forming in his stomach. Had he been a fool to help her? Was she just using him all along? Before anyone could speak further, the door to the diner opened again and an elderly man entered, shuffling toward their table. Kate immediately straightened her demeanor, shifting to respectful "sir." She began, but the old man waved her to silence. "Let's not make a scene here, Kate," he said in a gravelly voice. "We agreed on a diplomatic approach." The old man turned rheumy eyes toward Lyra. "Forgive our abruptness." "Commander Vixari," he said. "I'm Director Wilson, Special Department of Extraterrestrial Research. We need to talk, but not here." He glanced around the diner. "Meet us at the old fire lookout tower in 1 hour. Bring your ranger friend and your little dragon, too." He smiled gently. "The one you call Ember, isn't it?" With that, they left Kate giving one last measuring look at Lyra before following the director out. Ethan and Lyra sat in stunned silence. Ember poked his head out of the pouch, making a questioning chirp. "They know," Ethan whispered. "They know everything." Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable by human standards, but Ethan had learned to see the subtle signs of her emotions. The slight tightening around her eyes indicated concern. "I must contact my superiors," she said quietly. "This changes the parameters of my mission." Ethan looked at her, feeling something twist inside him. "So it is true. You are gathering intelligence for an invasion." Lyra met his eyes, her silver gaze steady. My mission is classified. She said the same words from when they first met, but her tone was different now. Uncertain. Are you gonna hurt people? Ethan asked directly. Are your people coming to conquer? Earth Ember chirped loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. The dragon climbed out of the pouch, completely ignoring Lyra's hissed command to hide. It jumped onto the table, its scales shifting to a deep purple, a color Ethan had never seen before. The small creature looked between Lyra and Ethan, making urgent sounds. Lyra stared at her companion with genuine surprise. Ember never disobeys, she whispered. The dragon's behavior is unprecedented. They left money on the table and hurried back to Ethan's truck. The drive to the fire lookout was tense, Ethan gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Lyra sat silently beside him occasionally, glancing at him with an expression he couldn't read. Ember sat between them, scales still that unusual purple. The fire lookout stood on a rocky outcropping, giving views for miles in every direction. Kate Winters waited at the base, hands clasped behind, her back looking every inch the government agent. The old man, Director Wilson, sat on a bench nearby, looking much more fragile in the daylight as they approached. Kate stepped forward. Commander Vexari, she said formally, I represent Earth Defense Coalition, a multinational organization formed 15 years ago after our first contact with your species. Ethan turned to Lyra in shock, but the alien commander looked equally surprised. Impossible, she said. My mission is first contact the Sylvan. Confederation has no record of prior engagement with humans. Director Wilson chuckled softly. No, they wouldn't, would they? He said. Because the ship we recovered 15 years ago wasn't military. It was a refugee vessel carrying Sylvans fleeing from your Confederation. Lyra stepped back as if physically struck by the words. Her translator device made a strange sound, as if struggling to process concepts it wasn't programmed for refugees. She repeated, that cannot be accurate. The Confederation is united. Our society is perfect. Kate snorted. Perfect if you like military dictatorships, she said. Your refugees told us everything. How the Confederation conquered 3 peaceful species. How dissenters are mind-wiped. How your people plan to harvest Earth for resources. Ember chirped loudly and flew to Director Wilson, landing gently on the old man's knee. To everyone's surprise, the director stroked the dragon's head with familiar ease. Ember leaning into the touch. Hello, little one, Wilson said softly. You're bigger than the others we found. Lyra looked between the dragon and the humans, her world tilting on its axis. Others, she whispered. Wilson nodded. We have 7 dragons from the refugee ship. They told us you were coming. Eventually, the Sylvan military always follows refugees to make examples of them. He looked at Lyra with knowing eyes, but the dragons chose sides long ago, didn't they, Commander? The dragons remember what your people have forgotten. Ethan watched as Lyra seemed to struggle. With this information, her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. He had never seen her composure crack before. Lies, she said finally. My superiors would never. She stopped abruptly as Ember flew back to her, landing on her shoulder. The dragon pressed its head against her cheek, making a soft trilling sound. Lyra's eyes widened. What are you showing me? She whispered to the dragon. Kate and Director Wilson exchanged glances. This is why we approached you directly, Director Wilson said. The dragons have abilities your military has suppressed. Dragon memory, they call it. They can share ancestral knowledge, images from the past. Ethan stepped forward, feeling protective of Lyra despite everything. Why tell us this, he demanded. Why not? Just capture her when she crashed. A fair question, Kate acknowledged. We need her. The refugee Sylvans warned us that your full invasion fleet is coming, Commander. She fixed Lyra with an intense stare. But that's not the worst threat, is it? Tell her, Director. The old man sighed heavily, looking suddenly every one of his many years. The Sylvan refugees were running from something worse than their own government, he said. Something they called the Void. A darkness between stars that consumes worlds. The Confederation isn't invading Earth for resources. They need a new home because their worlds are being devoured. Lyra shook her head. This is fiction, she insisted. My mission briefing mentioned nothing of this void. And why would it? Kate asked. The military keeps its soldiers in the dark. Your leaders need cannon fodder, not informed citizens. Ember chirped again, more insistently. This time, the dragon's scales shifted to black with tiny points of light like stars. The effect was beautiful and terrifying. Lyra gasped as the dragon pressed against her temple again. Ethan watched in confusion as tears began to stream down Lyra's face. The alien commander, who had always maintained perfect control, was crying. Her shoulders shaking, Ember continued to share whatever visions it possessed, keeping contact with her truth. She whispered, finally looking at the humans with new eyes. It shows me truth. My people. The void. Our history. The dragons. She looked at Ember with wonder. They were our partners once before the military took control. Memories passed through generations, Director Wilson nodded solemnly. The dragons remember what your people chose to forget. He said, the alliance between species. The ancient wars. The spacecraft shook violently as it entered Earth atmosphere. The metal hull glowing red from the heat. Lyra Vixari gripped her command chair with green, six-fingered hands. Her pointed ears twitching with annoyance at the malfunctioning stealth. Systems Ember. Her small dragon companion chirped nervously from the safety harness beside her. The creature no bigger than a house cat, but with scales that shifted colors with its mood, currently a worried orange. Systems failing, collision imminent, Lyra muttered to herself in the Sylvan language, her silver eyes narrowing as she fought with the controls. The military commander had not expected her reconnaissance mission to go so badly wrong before it even began. The Sylvan Confederation expected detailed reports on human defenses before the invasion fleet arrived in 6 months. The mountains of the region humans called Colorado rushed up to meet her ship. Warning alarms blared as Lyra attempted one last desperate maneuver to slow her descent. But the engine sputtered and died completely. The impact threw her against the restraints, knocking her unconscious as the ship carved a smoking crater into the remote wilderness. Ethan Miller had been tracking a herd of elk through the pine forest. When the bright light streaked across the morning sky, the park ranger watched in amazement as whatever it was crashed about 2 miles from his position. Curiosity overcoming caution, he radioed in that he would investigate a possible meteorite impact before heading toward the rising column of smoke. The sight that greeted him was beyond anything Ethan had expected. The object was clearly not a meteorite, but some sort of metallic craft half buried in the earth and still smoking from re-entry. The ranger approached cautiously, his years of wilderness training making him mindful of each step. A section of the craft had torn open, revealing a cockpit inside. Ethan peered in and froze at what he saw. A humanoid figure slumped over what appeared to be controls. The being had emerald skin, long silvery hair, and what looked like pointed ears visible through the strands. Most shocking of all was the small dragon-like creature pawing at the unconscious pilot and making distressed chittering. Sounds Ethan knew he should call this in immediately. This was beyond park ranger jurisdiction. This was a matter for the military or NASA or some agency with letters. He probably wasn't even cleared to know. But something about the injured being and the clearly distressed small creature made him hesitate. The thought of government scientists dissecting the pair made his stomach turn. The small dragon noticed him. Then, its scales shifting from orange to a defensive red, it placed itself between Ethan and the unconscious pilot, hissing a warning. Ethan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. I just want to help, he said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand him but hoping his tone would. The dragon creature tilted its head, studying him with intelligent eyes that seemed to glow from within. The pilot groaned and the dragon's attention snapped back to her. She was alive but clearly injured. Ethan made a split-second decision that would change the course of human and Sylvan history forever. Instead of calling in the crash, he would take the alien to his cabin and help her recover. His cabin was isolated enough that no one would know, and he could always call it in later if things went badly. With extreme care, Ethan managed to extract the alien woman from the wreckage. The dragon remained agitated but seemed to understand he was trying to help. The alien was surprisingly light, given her height, which Ethan guessed to be around 6 feet. The ranger gently placed her in the back of his forestry service truck, covering her with a blanket. The dragon refused to be separated from her, jumping into the truck bed and maintaining a vigilant watch. The drive to Ethan's cabin took nearly an hour on rough mountain roads. The alien woman remained unconscious, but Ethan could see her chest rising and falling with steady breath. The dragon had gradually shifted from red to a cautious yellow, watching Ethan with unblinking eyes. The cabin was rustic, but comfortable, a place Ethan had inherited from his grandfather and renovated over the years. It sat in a clearing surrounded by pine trees, with the nearest neighbor over 5 miles away. Ethan carried the alien inside, laying her on his bed. The cut on her forehead oozed bluish blood, which he carefully cleaned with a damp cloth. The dragon hopped onto the bedside table, watching every move Ethan made with those intelligent eyes. To Ethan's surprise, it allowed him to check its body for injuries, though it kept its wings tightly folded against its back. Hours passed as Ethan waited. The alien woman showed no signs of waking, though her breathing remained steady. He took the opportunity to examine her more closely. Her skin was a light green color, like jade. Her ears tapered to delicate points. Her hair was silvery white despite her youthful appearance. She wore what appeared to be some sort of uniform made from a material Ethan couldn't identify. It seemed to shift and adapt to her body, almost like a living thing. Night fell and Ethan dozed in a chair beside the bed. The dragon had curled up next to its master's head, its scales now a calm blue as it slept. Ethan was awakened by a sudden movement. The alien woman had sat bolt upright in bed, her silver eyes wide with alarm. She spat words in a language that sounded like wind. Through crystal, Ethan raised his hands again, the universal sign of peace. The alien woman narrowed her eyes and reached for what Ethan now realized was a weapon at her hip, but the holster was empty, lost in the crash probably. She glanced around, taking in her surroundings with military precision. The dragon awakened and chirped happily, seeing its master conscious. To Ethan's surprise, the creature bounded over to him, rubbing against his arm like a cat before returning to the alien. The woman looked stunned at this behavior. Ethan pointed to himself. "Ethan," he said slowly, then gestured to her with a questioning look. The alien seemed to consider for a moment. Before responding, "Lyra Vixari," she said, her voice musical despite the clipped tone. Her hand went to her temple where a small device was attached. She adjusted it and then spoke again, this time in accented but understandable English. "Your designation is Ethan. You are human. You have assisted me." Ethan nodded, not questioning how she could suddenly speak English. "That translator thing on your head must work really well," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the extraordinary situation. "Yes, I helped you. Your ship crashed and you were hurt. How do you feel?" The alien Lyra tilted her head. "Your concern is noted, human." "Ethan." She swung her legs over the side of the bed and attempted to stand, but swayed dangerously. Ethan moved to support her, but stopped when she glared at him. The small dragon had no such reservations. It flew to Ethan's shoulder and nuzzled his cheek before returning to Lyra. The alien woman looked at her companion with what appeared to be confusion. "Ember, your behavior is inappropriate," she said. The dragon named Ember chirped what sounded like disagreement. Lyra turned her attention back to Ethan. "My mission is classified. The Sylvan Confederation does not wish to alarm your species with formal contact at this time. I require assistance to repair my vessel and continue my assignment. Will you comply?" Ethan considered her words. Their implications were enormous. Aliens were real. They were watching Earth. They had some kind of plans that required secrecy. He should definitely report this. But looking at the injured alien woman and her strangely affectionate dragon companion, Ethan found himself nodding. "I will help you," he said. "But I'm just a park ranger. I don't know anything about spaceships. You might be stuck here a while." Lyra frowned. "This is problematic," she said, "but acceptable under current circumstances." The dragon Ember chirped and flew excited circles around the room before landing on Ethan's shoulder again. That night, as Lyra slept again, recovering from her injuries, Ethan sat on his porch looking up at the stars. He wondered how many other worlds were out there and what the arrival of this alien woman would mean for humanity. For him, one thing was certain: life would never be the same, over. The next days, Lyra regained her strength. The alien woman was cautious around Ethan, at first treating him with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying a specimen. She asked endless questions about human society, technology, and defenses, while revealing little about herself or her mission. Ember the dragon had no such reservations. The small creature followed Ethan everywhere, watching him cook, chop wood, and perform cabin maintenance with fascinated eyes. When Lyra wasn't looking, Ember would allow Ethan to stroke the smooth scales along its back, purring with a sound like distant wind chimes. 1 week after the crash, Ethan took Lyra to see her ship. The craft was partially buried but intact, except for the damaged section they had escaped. Lyra examined it with a critical eye. The primary systems are beyond repair without proper tools and materials, she announced. The translation device she wore allowed Ethan to understand her, but did nothing to warm her clinical tone. I must adapt to local conditions until retrieval? What? Ethan asked. Does that mean you're stuck here? Lyra nodded stiffly, affirmative. My people will not send a recovery team until the main fleet arrives in approximately 6 months. I must continue my mission and study human defenses and behaviors until then. Ethan felt a chill at her words. Main fleet defenses? Were her people planning something hostile? He looked at Lyra differently now, seeing not just an alien visitor, but possibly an advanced scout for an invasion. As if sensing his thoughts, Ember flew to perch on Ethan's shoulder, nuzzling against his cheek. The dragon had grown attached to him in ways that clearly puzzled Lyra. Whenever the alien commander, the government facility hidden within a mountain complex, was nothing like the sterile laboratories Lyra had expected. Instead, the spaces felt almost homey, with plants, warm lighting, and open areas. 3 months had passed since the revelations at the Fire Lookout Tower, and in that time Lyra had learned more truth about her people and herself than in all her previous years. Ember had grown dramatically, now the size of a large dog. His scales shifted through colors more vividly than before, and he had developed the ability to produce small controlled flames, a talent that both delighted and concerned the human scientists. Studying him, Lyra stood in the observation room watching as Ethan worked with the 7 refugee dragons. The human ranger had shown an extraordinary affinity for the creatures, earning their trust in ways that surprised even the Sylvan refugees who had escaped with them. Neela, one of those refugees, approached Lyra, her own green skin a shade darker than Lyra's, her silver hair braided in the traditional style of the eastern provinces, a fashion banned by the Confederation military for being too individualistic. Your human is remarkable, Neela commented, standing beside Lyra at the window. He has the old touch, the dragon affinity. We thought lost to both our peoples. Lyra nodded, watching as Ethan coaxed a shy purple dragon into flight around the large indoor training area. Something about him resonates with them, she agreed. Something I never noticed until Ember showed me. The memories Ember had shared with her had changed everything. Dragons had once been partners to both Sylvans and humans in ancient times, before the rise of the Confederation military. The connection between species had been severed. Deliberately, the dragon's abilities to share ancestral memories deemed dangerous to military control. The command center buzzes with activity. Director Wilson entered, leaning more heavily on his cane than when they first met. The old man had been working tirelessly, preparing Earth's defenses, coordinating with governments around the world. We have a situation, Director Wilson announced, Kate Winters beside him, bringing up images on the large screen dominating one wall. Orbital telescopes have detected a ship entering the solar system. It's not following the trajectory we expected for the main fleet. It's coming in fast and alone. Lyra studied the images, recognition dawning. The advanced scout, she said. It's a Pathfinder-class vessel. She turned to Director Wilson with concern. Pathfinders always precede the main fleet by several months to establish forward bases and communication arrays. Kate stepped forward, bringing up enhanced images of the ship. The profile matches Pathfinder specifications. According to the database our refugee friends provided, she confirmed, we estimate Earthfall in 72 hours. Can we communicate with it? Lyra shook her head. Once a Pathfinder is deployed, it operates under communications blackout until it establishes the forward-base military protocol. The commander will have complete operational discretion. Director Wilson looked troubled. So we can't warn them about what we know about the void, he said. What makes this worse, Lyra added, is that Pathfinders are typically commanded by the most loyal, most dedicated officers. Officers who would never question their orders or believe anything, counter to their training. Ethan had joined them, still wearing the dragon handling gloves, listening to the discussion. His face showed the concern they all felt. Is there any way to reach them, he asked. Any way to make them listen? Lyra hesitated, then looked at Ember, who had followed Ethan into the command center. The dragon met her gaze, eyes glowing with intelligence. Perhaps, she said, there might be one way. The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. The government facility had a small ship confiscated from the Sylvan refugees years ago, updated with human technology and maintained by the refugee engineers. It was spaceworthy, though barely Lyra would pilot it to intercept the Pathfinder before it reached Earth orbit. Accompanying her would be Ethan and Ember, despite her protests that the mission was too dangerous for a human. The reality was that Ember refused to be separated from either of them, a bond that had grown stronger each day. The refugee Sylvans had explained that dragon bonds once formed were unbreakable. The ancient texts spoke of triads where dragons would sometimes connect two beings from different species, creating a bridge between worlds. This appeared to be happening with Ember, Ethan, and Lyra, though none understood why. The small ship launched under cover of darkness, rocketing into the upper atmosphere. Ethan, strapped into a seat modified for human anatomy, gripped the harness with white knuckles. He had never imagined space travel would be part of his life as a park ranger, yet here he was, leaving Earth behind. Lyra piloted with the precision expected of a Sylvan commander, her movements sure despite the unfamiliar controls modified by human engineers. Ember sat between them in a special harness, his scales shifting between excited gold and nervous blue. Their plan was simple and desperate. Intercept the Pathfinder, identify the commander, and attempt to share the truth through Ember's memory-sharing ability. It relied entirely on the commander being willing to listen, even for a moment long enough for Ember to make contact. 20 hours later, they floated in the shadow of Earth's moon, the modified engines silent as they waited for the approaching Pathfinder. The ship would pass close by, using the moon's gravity to adjust its trajectory toward Earth. Lyra checked the communication system one last time. This will broadcast my military identification, she explained to Ethan. It should prevent them firing on us immediately. But once they realize I am operating an unauthorized vessel, they will consider me a traitor. Ethan reached across the space between them, taking her hand, something that had become natural between them over the months. She looked up in surprise at the gesture. Whatever happens, he said, I want you to know these past months, knowing you has been the most amazing experience of my life. Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest, an emotion the Sylvan military had tried to condition out of their soldiers, but which had returned to her during her time on Earth. Affection, perhaps even something deeper. Her fingers tightened around his. The sensors chimed, a warning. The Pathfinder had been detected, approaching exactly as predicted. Its sleek form, much larger than their small vessel, gleamed in the distant sunlight. Lyra activated the communication array. Commander Lyra Vexari, identification code, Starshard 7932, requesting emergency communication and docking with Pathfinder vessel, she said, formally using the military protocols drilled into her since childhood. Long moments passed before a response came. Commander Vexari. This is Pathfinder, Vessel Dawnseeker. A familiar voice filled the cabin, making Lyra stiffen in recognition. Commander Ivy Thornall speaking. Your signal shows you operating an unauthorized vessel. Explain immediately. Lyra felt a chill run through her. Of all the commanders who might have been assigned to the Pathfinder, Ivy was perhaps the worst possibility. They had trained together, risen through the ranks as battle sisters before Lyra had been selected for the advance reconnaissance mission. Ivy was utterly devoted to the Confederation, her loyalty absolute. Emergency situation, Commander Lyra responded, keeping her voice steady. My reconnaissance vessel was damaged, requiring use of this alternative craft. I have vital intelligence regarding the human defenses. Request immediate docking for information. Transfer pause stretched between the ships. Finally, Ivy responded. Docking approved. Follow transmitted approach vector. Any deviation will be considered hostile. Action. Ethan looked at Lyra, concern evident. In his expression, she was lying to her former comrade, but it was the only way to get aboard. That was your friend? He asked quietly. Battle sister, Lyra corrected. We trained together, served together. But Ivy has no friends, only the mission. She will execute me as a traitor the moment she realizes what we know. The small ship approached the Pathfinder, following the designated flight path exactly. Automated systems took over for the final docking sequence, metal clamps securing the vessels together with a resonating clunk. The airlock cycled, showing pressure normalization. Ember shifted restlessly in his harness scales, now a deep purple with streaks of silver. The dragon had grown again during their journey, now the size of a large wolf. His connection to both Lyra and Ethan seemed to be accelerating his development in ways none of them understood. Remember the plan, Lyra said as they prepared to board the Pathfinder. I will speak with Ivy while you remain with the ship. Ember must stay hidden until I signal. Then and only then does he reveal himself to share the memories with Ivy. Any earlier, and she will simply shoot him. Ethan nodded, though he looked uncomfortable with the plan. Ember made a low, rumbling sound that might have been disagreement but settled when Lyra stroked his head. The airlock opened, revealing 2 armed Sylvan guards, and beyond them the tall, imposing figure of Commander Ivy Thornale. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture perfect. Her skin was the same shade of green as Lyra's, but her eyes were harder, her expression colder. Commander Vexari, Ivy said formally, then her eyes widened. Seeing Ethan, you brought a human aboard, she said, her hand moving to her sidearm. Explain yourself. Lyra stepped forward, smoothly placing herself between Ivy and Ethan. The human is my prisoner, she lied. A high-ranking military officer I captured for interrogation. His information is part of what I need to share. Ivy looked unconvinced, but gestured for them to follow. The guards fell in behind, watching Ethan with obvious disgust. The small group moved through the ship toward the command center, Lyra noting the positions of crew. 6 months after the encounter with the Pathfinder, Earth had transformed. The revelation of both the Sylvan fleet and the approaching void had united humanity in ways previously thought impossible. Nations pooled resources, scientists worked across borders, and the hidden government facility expanded into a global command center. Lyra stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital defense platform, watching as shuttles ferried materials from Earth to the growing fleet of hybrid vessels combining Sylvan technology with human innovation. Below her, the blue marble of Earth spun serene and beautiful. Ember flew lazy circles around the vast open space of the observation deck. His growth had continued unabated, the dragon now, the size of a small bus. His wings spanning 20 feet when fully extended. His scales shifted between deep sapphire and bright gold depending on his mood, which seemed perpetually excited. These days, Commander Vexari, a voice called Lyra, turned to see Kate Winters approaching, datapad in hand. The human woman had become an essential part of the United Defense Force, her tactical mind and diplomatic skills bridging gaps between species. Director Wilson sends his regards, Kate said, joining Lyra at the viewport. His health prevents him from making the journey to orbit, but he monitors everything from the mountain base. She handed over the datapad, the latest readings from the Deep Space Array. The void has slowed, but continues its approach. Current estimates give us 4 weeks, maybe less. Lyra reviewed the data, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the screen. The Sylvan refugees had explained that the void seemed to assess worlds before consuming them. It would slow as it approached, sometimes hovering at the edges of a solar system for months before striking. This gave them precious time but also heightened the tension of waiting. Where is Ethan? Lyra asked, returning the datapad. Her voice softened when speaking his name, a change that hadn't gone unnoticed by those who worked with her. The formerly rigid Sylvan commander had developed emotions she would have once considered weakness. Now she recognized them as strength. Kate smiled. With the dragons, of course. Where else would he be? The Earth Dragon Corps is running flight drills in the lower atmosphere. She pointed toward the planet. Should be visible on the southern approach in about 20 minutes. The Earth Dragon Corps was Ethan's creation. An unlikely partnership between the 7 original refugee dragons, the now enormous Ember, and 17 newly awakened dragons that had somehow emerged from Earth itself, ancient creatures that had been sleeping within mountains and deep forests for millennia. The dragons had chosen human and Sylvan riders, forming bonds that amplified their natural abilities. These dragons were Earth's most powerful defense against the void. The ancient texts retrieved from Sylvan archives and combined with legends from Earth spoke of dragonfire as the one element that could burn away the void essence. The only weapon that had ever successfully pushed back the darkness. Lyra checked the chronometer built into her modified uniform. Another hour until the Sylvan delegation arrives, she noted. The first diplomatic exchange between our peoples not conducted in secrecy. Kate nodded, her expression serious. Admiral Chen believes the fleet will agree to the alliance, but some factions remain loyal to the old military ideals. The evidence we've provided about the void has convinced most, but not all. Lyra understood the concern. The Sylvan invasion fleet had arrived at the edge of the solar system 2 weeks ago. Nearly 300 ships carrying almost 1 million of her people to their surprise Earth had hailed them immediately, presenting evidence of the void and offering alliance rather than resistance. The fleet had been thrown into chaos, factions forming between those who believed the evidence and those loyal to military doctrine. Ivy Thornell, now promoted to admiral after her Pathfinder mission, had become the voice of reason among the fleet, using Ember's memory sharing and the hard data collected by both species to convince the leadership of the truth. Now, after weeks of tense communication, the first official delegation would arrive to formalize the alliance. Lyra felt Ember's presence before she saw him. The mental bond between them had grown stronger, allowing a type of wordless communication. The dragon swooped toward the observation deck. A rider on his back, Ethan's form instantly recognizable to Lyra. Despite the distance, Ember landed with surprising grace for his size, folding massive wings along his back. Ethan slid from the special saddle designed by Sylvan and human engineers together. He wore the flight suit of the Dragon Corps, the material shifting to disperse heat generated by Ember's scales. His face broke into a wide smile when he saw Lyra. The dragons performed beautifully, he said, approaching. You should have seen them. The formation flying is getting tighter every day. He embraced Lyra briefly, a human gesture she had come to appreciate. The warmth of the connection between them had deepened over the months, moving beyond initial curiosity to something neither had words for. Yet Ethan greeted Kate with a respectful nod. Updates on the void. Kate repeated the information she had shared with Lyra, adding, "The science team has new theories about its composition. It seems to consume energy. Rather than matter, worlds are left intact but lifeless, drained of all electromagnetic energy and heat. Essentially dead husks." Ember growled low in his throat, scales shifting to a deep crimson along his spine. The dragon understood more than most, realized another development that had surprised both species. A chime sounded throughout the station. "Admiral Chen requesting your presence in the diplomatic chamber," Kate announced. "The Sylvan delegation has advanced their arrival time. They will dock in 20 minutes. The diplomatic chamber of the orbital platform was a marvel of collaborative design. One half featured the flowing organic architecture of Sylvan tradition, while the other showcased the more angular human aesthetic. The center, where the two styles met, blended harmoniously. Symbolic of the hoped-for alliance, Admiral Chen, a distinguished human military leader with decades of experience, stood at the human side of the chamber. Representatives from Earth governments gathered. Behind her, Kate took her position as diplomatic liaison. Lyra, Ethan, and Ember stood in the center, symbolizing the bridge between species. Lyra, now officially recognized as ambassador between worlds, a role she had never imagined for herself. The airlock cycled and 5 Sylvan representatives entered the chamber. 4 wore the traditional military uniform of Fleet Command. The 5th wore the flowing robes of the once suppressed Sylvan civilian government, a position restored after the revelations. About military control. Lyra recognized the civilian immediately, Elder Moira Vixari, her own mother, whom she had not seen in 20 years. Not since entering military service. A reunion she had not expected but welcomed with a formal sylvan bowie. Diplomatic proceedings began with presentations from both sides. Evidence about the void was shared projections of its path displayed in 3 dimensions above the central table. The destruction of 3 former Sylvan colonies shown in stark detail. Elder Moira spoke, her voice carrying the musical quality all civilian Sylvans preserved. The evidence is irrefutable, she said. The military council remains divided, but the civilian restoration government accepts the alliance proposal. We bring 50 ships immediately to your defense fleet. The remainder will follow as the council members are convinced. Admiral Chen nodded gravely. We welcome your ships and your people, she replied. Earth has prepared settlement areas in regions with compatible climate. Several island nations have offered territory. As the officials continued discussing logistics, Lyra felt a familiar tug at her consciousness. Ember was trying to communicate something urgent. The dragon had grown still, his scales shifting to that now familiar star-filled black pattern, golden lines forming complex designs across his body. Ethan noticed it too, moving closer to the dragon. Something wrong, boy? He asked softly. Ember raised his massive head toward the viewport beyond the diplomatic chamber, his entire body tensing. Lyra followed his gaze, seeing nothing but stars and Earth's partial curve. Then she saw it, a subtle darkening of the stars in one section of space. Not a cloud or ship, but an absence. Something moving. A tendril of them. Void reaching toward them ahead of the main mass. It's here, Lyra announced, cutting through the diplomatic exchanges. It's found us sooner than predicted. Alarms blared throughout the station as sensors finally detected what Ember had somehow already known. The Void had sent a probe, a tendril of darkness accelerating toward the orbital platform. We need to evacuate, Admiral Chen ordered calmly, but firmly. All personnel to emergency stations. The Sylvan delegation looked to Elder Moira for direction, but the civilian leader turned to Lyra instead. What does the dragon say? She asked, surprising everyone present. Lyra placed her hand on Ember's neck, feeling the vibration of energy beneath his scales. The dragon communicated not in words but impressions, images, feelings. The meaning was clear. He says we fight. Lyra translated. This is just a probe testing our defenses. If it touches the station, it will drain all energy, killing everyone aboard, but returning valuable information to the main Void entity. We must destroy it here. How? Elder Moira asked. Dragonfire, Ethan said simply. He was already moving toward Ember's saddle, the dragon lowering to allow him to mount. Lyra understood immediately, joining him on the dragon's back. There was room for both of them on the specialized saddle. The 3 of them connected in ways that transcended species. The prophecy made manifest. Admiral Chen looked ready to object, but the final battle came sooner than anyone expected. 1 year after the first encounter with the Void probe, the darkness arrived in full force, engulfing the outer planets of the solar system in its hungry embrace. The combined fleet of Earth and Sylvan vessels formed a defensive perimeter around Earth and Mars. The last strongholds of life in the system. Lyra stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony, a massive vessel created through human and Sylvan cooperation. The ship represented the best of both worlds. Sylvan organic technology melded with human innovation. The view screen showed the approaching darkness, a wall of nothingness that consumed light itself. Elder Moira, now Chancellor of the United Sylvan People, stood beside her, daughter pride evident in her bearing despite the gravity of the situation. The civilian government had fully replaced the military dictatorship after the truth of history had spread through memory-sharing dragons. Throughout the fleet, former enemies worked side by side with newfound respect. Dragon riders prepare for deployment, Admiral Chen announced from her command station. The hundreds of dragons that had awakened on Earth over the past year had been joined by those hidden among the Sylvan fleet, each bonded with pairs of humans and Sylvans, creating triads of power like Lyra, Ethan, and Ember. The dragon core had become the primary weapon against the Void. Ethan entered the bridge, still wearing his flight armor. His face showed the strain of continuous battle over the preceding weeks as they had fought delaying actions against void tendrils. The former park ranger, now commander of the Dragon Corps, carried responsibility for hundreds of riders and dragons. His eyes found Lyra immediately, their bond allowing silent communication across distance. "Ember waits in the main launch bay," Ethan said aloud for the benefit of others. "The dragon sense is strong today. They feel the void reaching for Earth directly." He crossed to stand with Lyra and Chancellor Moira, forming a small family unit that would have been unthinkable when Lyra first crashed on Earth. The science team reports from the auxiliary bridge. Kate Winters announced, entering with datapad in hand. Her role as liaison had expanded to include coordinating the research efforts of both species. The combined scientists had made breakthroughs in understanding the void, though much remained mysterious. The void is accelerating. Its hunger seems focused on Earth specifically. The energy patterns suggest it senses the dragons and sees them as either threat or food. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "The plan remains unchanged," she said. "The fleet creates a corridor through the darkness. The Dragon Corps follows, delivering the resonance device to the Void Core. Our scientists believe disrupting the core will cause the entire entity to collapse. The resonance device was the product of human-Sylvan dragon collaboration, a weapon that amplified dragon fire into a frequency that could unravel the void from within. The theory was sound but untested against the full entity. Someone would need to carry it to the heart of darkness itself." Lyra and Ethan exchanged glances. They had known from the beginning it would be them. Ember had grown beyond any other dragon, his connection to both human and Sylvan making him uniquely powerful. The prophecy spoken of in ancient texts had prepared the way. 3 who stand as one would face the darkness when it came. Chancellor Moira embraced. Her daughter Lyra had explained the plan to her mother weeks ago. There had been tears then, but now the elder Sylvan showed only strength. "My daughter," she said, "you have united worlds. You will save them." Admiral Chen activated the ship-wide communication system. "Attention all personnel," she announced. "The void has accelerated its approach. Timeline is compressed. Execute Operation Daybreak immediately. All ships to battle stations. Dragon Corps deploy on my mark." Throughout the massive ship and across, the fleet, humans and Sylvans moved with purpose. The year of preparation had created smooth efficiency between species, each knowing their role in the desperate plan to save not just Earth, but all worlds threatened by the void. Lyra and Ethan made their way to the main launch bay, a cavernous space redesigned to accommodate dragons of all sizes. Ember waited in the center, his enormous form dwarfing the other dragons. His scales shifted between deep gold and that special star-filled black pattern that appeared when he accessed ancestral memory. The resonance device had been secured to a special harness on his back, a crystalline structure that pulsed with contained energy designed to channel and amplify dragon fire. The device represented the best hope for all living beings. Kate Winters met them at the preparation area. Her usual professional demeanor softened. "The science team made final adjustments to the device," she explained. "These calibrations should allow maximum energy transfer when Ember breathes fire directly into the core." Her hand rested briefly on the dragon's scales. "The device will only activate when you reach the center. The black hole like gravity. Well, our probes detected." "This has to be precise." Ethan nodded, understanding. Theon said, "The mission was likely one way. The force required to penetrate the Void Core would make retreat difficult if not impossible." Other dragon riders prepared around them. Each triad of dragon, human, and Sylvan represented a powerful fighting unit. Some would create the path through the void mass. Others would defend the flagship and remaining fleet. But the final thrust would be Ember's alone. Lyra checked her flight suit one last time. The armor incorporated technologies from both worlds, designed to protect against the energy-draining effects of the void. The helmet included enhanced communication systems allowing coordination with the fleet. She looked at Ethan, doing the same beside her. "No regrets?" she asked quietly, their private moment amid the bustling preparations. He smiled, that human expression that had first intrigued her all those months ago, when she arrived as an invader and found a friend instead. "Every moment with you has been worth it," he replied. "We saved 2 worlds from war. Now we save all worlds from darkness." "Seems like a fair trade." Ember rumbled, agreement scales brightening at their exchange. The dragon had developed understanding beyond what either species had thought possible. His thoughts touched theirs, through their bond, not words but emotions, images, purpose, resolution, determination, hope. The final call came from Admiral Chen. "Dragon Core deploy." The massive bay doors opened, revealing the star field beyond, already darkening as the void approached. The protective field kept atmosphere inside while allowing the dragons to launch. Ember moved toward the opening, Lyra and Ethan mounting the special saddle designed for them, their hands clasped briefly before securing the final restraints. Around them 200 dragons launched, their scales gleaming against the darkness like stars defying the void. Ember roared the sound, carrying impossible strength, then launched into space. His wings spread wide, catching solar energy. His massive form accelerated quickly, joining the formation of dragons arrayed against the darkness. From the flagship and accompanying vessels, energy weapons fired, creating initial breaches in the void mass. The darkness writhed and pulsed, attempting to repair itself, but the continuous barrage maintained small ruptures. The dragon formation approached these openings, Ember in the lead. They breathed fire in unison, the unique energy cutting deeper into the void than any mechanical weapon. The darkness recoiled, tendrils lashing out in defense. The battle joined in earnest. Dragons diving, weaving, breathing golden flame. Void tendrils striking, absorbing energy where they could. Several dragons fell, their light extinguished. Others continued pressing forward, their riders guiding, maintaining formation. Ember flew directly toward the largest breach, his size and speed creating momentum. The void could not easily stop. Lyra and Ethan worked in perfect harmony with their dragon. Lyra monitoring the resonance device, Ethan tracking their position relative to the fleet. The 3 minds linked, sharing information faster than words could convey. The first layer of the void parted before dragon fire. Ember plunged into darkness, followed by his honor guard of 20 elite dragons. Instantly the cold emptiness surrounded them. Light faded except for the glow of dragon scales. The nothingness pulled at mind and body, attempting to unravel their very essence. Through their bond, Lyra and Ethan shared strength, with Ember in each other, the connection between them forming a barrier against the void's influence. The dragon pressed forward, wings beating against substance that was not substance, claws tearing at darkness that was more than absence of light. The honor guard dragons formed a protective sphere around Ember, each triad contributing to a network of shared power, their combined dragon fire illuminating the path deeper into the void. Communication with the fleet became sporadic, then failed completely. Inside the void, only the dragon bond remained reliable. Lyra activated backup systems using ancient Sylvan technology that operated on principles different from standard communications. Faint signals from the flagship confirmed they were on course. The second layer of the void was denser, more resistant to dragon fire. The honor guard faltered, several triads overwhelmed by the increasing cold. The surviving dragons tightened formation, their fire concentrated on a single point, allowing Ember to continue the journey. At the third layer, the true nature of the void revealed itself. Ghostly shapes swirled in the darkness, echoes of consumed worlds and civilizations. The remnants of all the void had devoured throughout countless millennia. Lyra glimpsed fragments of species, neither human nor Sylvan beings, from worlds long forgotten. Ember roared defiance against these shades, his fire burning brighter, hotter.